What about the swine story where Jesus casts the demons into the pigs? How do you manage that one?
So I guess keeping in mind that I see Jesus in the broader narrative as someone who clearly cared about animals, allowed people to pull animals out of pits on the Sabbath, right, which people thought was against the law. In the apocryphal texts, he's often portrayed as an animal lover, as one that has a very special relationship to animals. He's the one who reconciled the whole world, including animals, to God. Against that backdrop, it seems awfully odd to me that we would look at the case of his casting the swine or casting the demons into the swine as a case of his hating animals or wanting to see animals come to destruction. So that raises the question, well, what is going on in this strange case? Well, anytime we look at a strange case in biblical hermeneutics, it seems we want to be careful about making it normative, right? So we certainly don't want to think, well, there's this one strange case where this weird thing happens. We're not sure what to make of it, but let's just make that the reason we eat the way we do. That seems to me not to be on solid footing hermeneutically. But it does seem worthy of our interest to wonder, well, what might have been going on? How do we square the narrative of Jesus as the one through whom animals were created, the one who loves animals, the one who saves animals on the Sabbath, seemingly against the law? How do we square that with the Jesus in the case of the swine? Well, I'm not a theologian. I'm a philosophy professor. I read theologians. I find it fascinating. I'm not sure at the end of the day that too much hangs on it, but some of the things I've read that I found really interesting. There's a political reading, for instance. Remember that the demon who is cast out is called Legion. And of course, anyone at the time would have recognized that as, a reference to the Roman occupation, right? And so there's a political subtext here, and apparently the boar was associated with a particular legion, and this was supposed to be a figurative account of casting the Roman occupation out in some way. That's one way of thinking about it that I've heard. Another one that I've heard that I found really interesting, again, this is purely speculative, but it's about trying to square the person of Jesus we know from the theological arc as a whole with the Jesus in this particular case. Remember, Jesus doesn't decide, right, okay, where are some pigs that I can kill? The demon asks not to be destroyed, and the demon needs an embodied form, right, which is why the demon has been living in this person. And so the swine is nearby, and if Jesus is going to grant the demon's request not to be destroyed and show mercy and compassion, he casts the demon out. But in order for the demon to remain corporeal, the demon makes the choice to go into the swine, right? So the demon finds living beings to be a part of. And then this is the interesting part, again, very skeptical, but I've read a couple of commentators who suggested that it was the pigs' allegiance to Jesus, the Good Shepherd, that they threw themselves over the mountain in order to kill the demon, right? So Jesus was merciful to the demon, but the pigs, right, actually, lived into their mission as creatures of God by plunging into the sea and eradicating the demon. Now, again, these are highly speculative accounts. I'm not sure that one has to have a view, right, about these things in order to know what to do as 21st century Christians. But it does seem to me, and I guess this is the upshot, when we're thinking about who Jesus is, it's the whole theological narrative arc that should set the normative vision of who Jesus is and what Jesus wants. And for my money, the Jesus of mercy, compassion, justice, standing up for the marginalized, speaking up for those who have no voice, the Jesus who the one time where we see him in the scriptural narrative irate is when he's casting out people who are selling animals for sacrifice in the temple, right? I mean, the one time where we see Jesus fly off the handle is when people who are exploiting animals for money have taken over the temple. To me, the preponderance of evidence suggests that Jesus cares about animals, that Jesus wants us to care about animals, and choosing these outlier passages that very clearly have cultural context that most 21st century people are not in touch with, and making those the norms is, I think, hermeneutically ill-advised.